All right, I think we can get started. So, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Interpersonal Dynamics. Um, I'm Nathan, and I am a sales enablement manager with ChargeBee. I have about 14 years of experience in the learning and development space. So, before ChargeBee, I was with Cognizant for about 10 years. I was handling their behavioral training as part of Cognizance Academy. Um, I began my career with ALSEC, which was where I, started taking an interest in training there. Um, so today we're going to talk about interpersonal dynamics, and I think when GUVi reached out to me, and uh, so my friend works in GUVi, and so when he reached out to me and said, "Hey, would you like to do a session for us?" And since you are a behavioral specialist, why don't you choose a behavioral topic? Because we've been having quite a lot of technical discussions. And I was thinking, why not interpersonal skills? Because interpersonal skills is a topic that is very close to my heart because it talks about relationships and how you should, what you can do to make them better. Right? So let's start. If you have any questions, you can just enter them in the chat box, right? Now, here's something I'm going to tell you, which might be very shocking. So if you're not great with your interpersonal skills as yet, you are not going to be by the end of this session, right? So don't think that because I've attended these 1.5 hours with Nathan on interpersonal skills, at the end of it, I'm going to be excellent with my interpersonal skills, right? That's not going to happen. What you will have at the end of the session is information that you will need to implement. You will have information that will tell you what you need to do to be great with your interpersonal skills. And then how rigorously you implement that is how soon you will see improvement in you. Right? Patience is the key here. Right? Do you know what makes Netflix so great? Netflix so great than Amazon Prime or any of the other online streaming channels? So their waiting time to go to the next episode is 3 seconds. And of course, they give you the option of, skipping the intro. I think very soon, if they have an option where we can, especially when we're watching Indian movies, if they give us the option to skip songs, to skip fight scenes, it'll be great. But what makes Netflix better than everything else is that because you can go to the next episode in 3 seconds. And that is the patience level of today's world, right? Remember, I'm an 80s kid, right? So when I sat in front of the internet, it took me 20 minutes to open yahoo.com just to sign into my email. And every half an hour was 30 rupees. 30 rupees was like great money back in the day. But today, the patience level is in seconds, not even minutes. However, with behavior, that doesn't work. With behavior, that's not going to work. You need to be patient, right? If you implement what you learn here today and have an action plan for it, implement it, you will see changes in your behavior. You will see how you will get better at interpersonal skills, but it will take some time if you're not someone who's already great at it. So patience is the key. And remember, at the end of this session, nobody is going to be, or at least if you haven't, you're not going to be great in interpersonal skills. Okay. So where do you start? I always tell people when you are trying to bring about a change in yourself, right? Start with a group that you are most comfortable with. It can be your closest friends, or it can be your family. I tell people if you have kids in your house, start with them, right? Because one thing about kids is they're going to give you very honest feedback. They're going to tell you up to your face whether it's good or not, and they're not going to think about anything else. So if you're trying to bring about a change, try there. But otherwise, start with the group that's closest to you. The problem with people today is they come and attend one session, let's say assertive communication, right? They attend a 2 hour session. The next day, they probably have a meeting with their manager and they think, hey, I've attended communicate assertively, so I'm going to communicate assertively and I'm going to do that with my manager today. And that's how you get into trouble because you are not ready to do it. You are not ready to communicate assertively yet. And when you do it wrong, and if you start off with people in authority, you're going to get into trouble. So when you bring about that change, remember, start with groups that are closest to you. So today we're going to talk about interpersonal skills. Interpersonal skills is a group of different skills put together to help you have better relationships. And so when you're talking about a behavioral change like that, start with groups that are close to you. It can be your best friends, right? I always tell people to take advantage of friendship. Why don't you do it? Tell your friends, hey, I am going to make this improvement. So here's what I'm going to do from today, and I want you to support me in that. The thing with starting this off with friends is there's absolutely no consequences because your friends will understand, you guys can have fun with it, and that's the way you bring about a change. You introduce it slowly. What will happen is when you start practicing these elements with your closest friends, the others around you, people at work, the other circle of friends, they will start noticing a change in you. They will start seeing that slowly you are becoming better at your relationships, your trust. People are able to trust you more. And when they notice these changes gradually, people will be able to accept it. When you go and spring a change on them, it becomes chaotic. Sorry, who's this person all of a sudden, right? So where do you start? Whatever changes you're trying to make, start with the circle that is closest to you where there is no consequences, right? Don't go immediately and start doing this at work and say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. Always start with the circle that is closest to you. Right? So what is interpersonal skills? So interpersonal skills is a combination of many skills that will help you better your relationships, right? The thing with, I know the topic said interpersonal dynamics at work. However, these skills are skills that you should look at from a more holistic point of view. These are skills that you need to have in every facet of your life. So sometimes even with behavior, if people say, hey, Nathan, I want to be good at problem solving. I want to be good with client interfacing skills. I want to be good in interpersonal skills, but then I want to do all this only at work. Even that is not going to work because someday you'll forget how to turn that switch on and it'll be chaos. Right? It should come naturally to you, which means these are life skills. That is what I'd call them. These are skills that you need to develop for your life, not just for work, but also to use at home, because every relationship matters, right? Not just relationship at work, relationship at home matters, relationship with friends matter. Maybe the relationship you have when you go, shopping to a regular shop, uh, the kind of conversations you have even with people, for example, if you're taking a cab, all of this matters. It's how people perceive you. So you should look at this more, from as a life skill rather than just a skill that you will use at work. Okay. So what are these interpersonal skills? Like I said, it's assertiveness, it's nonverbal communication, listening skills, your negotiation skills, your verbal communication, written communication. How are you able to solve problems? How do you make decisions? Now, in today's session, we are not going to cover all of these skills because each of these skills is a training in itself. But what I will do is I'm going to talk about the underlying traits that is required in to be great at your interpersonal skills. And you will see how these skills will somehow fall in place in each of those traits, right? Like I said, if you have any questions as we go through these traits one by one, you can just put them in that chat box there, and I'll respond to that periodically. All right. So the first skill or the first trait we're going to talk about is your language and communication. Can anyone tell me what is the difference? I'll give it a minute to see some responses on the chat screen. What do you think is the difference between language and communication? Mm-hmm. Good. I can see some very interesting responses. Nice. Yeah. Uh, More or less all of you are right. So, communication is the act of sending a message across. Communication is, you don't need a language to communicate sometimes. Just the way you look at somebody communicates something. Your body language communicates something, right? The way you sit communicates something. The way you're dressed communicates something. So communication is the act of passing a message to the receiver. Language is one of the mediums that you use to communicate. And at work, we predominantly, or I think all of us, use English as a language to communicate. And here's where I want to spend a few minutes to talk to you about how important this skill is, or this, to build this, your language and your communication, right? All of us love our mother tongue. Our mother tongue is dear to our hearts, right? However, the lingua franca of the world today is English. So we use English in all our business communication. And it is important for you to hone the skills of that language. The language skills need to be good. And that is because if you're great with your communication, you need to articulate your thoughts. And the way you're able to articulate these thoughts is by using the language. So you need to be good at honing your language skills. And don't wait for a training. Today, we have so many resources on the internet. We don't have to wait for a training for you to better your language skills. If you go to Google and type English as a second language, you just type English as a second language, there you get a whole host of websites that you can go and play around with different exercises. There are fun ways you can do that. One of the sites I would recommend is also the British Council website, where they have very nice ways of to improve your language. You can choose a level, whether you want to be a beginner or a intermediate or an expert. Don't wait for trainings. There are a lot of resources on the internet. Right? And another tip I would give you is, the thing with English is people get caught up with the nomenclature. People want, when you start off simple. For example, if you're learning tenses, it's okay for you to know what is the past, simple, and present, right? The past tense, the present tense, and the future tense. Now, some people get so carried away by this that they want to go and then explore, and they start off with, let's say, the present continuous tense, simple past perfect, this, that, and all these things. You're only going to get confused. Grammar can be confusing, but actually it's not if you stick to the basics, right? Go and explore these things. Try to improve your language, because articulation is everything. How you articulate your thoughts when you speak is how people will perceive you. And in interpersonal skills, in relationships, the way you communicate a message is very important. And so you need to better your language skills. And as far as communication is concerned, there are 7 C's. These are the 7 C's to communication, right? One is you need to be clear about what you're saying. Uh, in every aspect, even the way you speak, right? Why is this so important in a relationship? Because when this all then boils down to trust. Okay, we'll see that in the next section. So when you speak, you always have to be clear, even in terms of the way you're saying things, not muffled sounds. You know how your mothers know that you are lying? How do mothers know that you're lying? One is they have a natural instinct, but otherwise, just by the way you say it, when you're muffled, when you're not very clear, people tend to start thinking, okay, is this person really meaning what he says? Right? So when you communicate, your communication has to be clear. For that, you need to know, yeah, even your body language, correct. So when you look away, when you look down, all of this, people are watching everything, right? So your language has to be clear. Your communication has to be clear. For that, you need to know whom you're speaking to, right? The second thing is you have to be concise. Uh, like I said, remember I spoke to you about the patience thing, right? So people today do not have time for this once upon a time format where you give all the information you want. Say, hey, you know what happened yesterday, this, that. Especially when you're in the business forum, it doesn't work that way. Today, what we talk about is, the descending format of communication. So say 20 years ago or 25 years ago, we had the ascending format of communication, which was you say what happened, you say how things happened and what happened, and then finally you give the consequence. But today it's not like that. Today we speak about action items first, right? We tell them what happened, what we need them to do, and then give the details, right? The details is an option there. If people want that information, they will ask you questions. So you should learn how to make your messages concise, short and crisp, and concrete, right? So for that, you should know what you're speaking about, right? If GUVi had come to me and said, hey, Nathan, can you do a session on coding? I would have said no, because I don't know anything about coding, right? If I am going to speak about something, I should know my stuff, right? I should give you concrete information, and I should give you correct information, because when people start noticing that most of the information that comes from you is false, then people will start disrespecting you. A classic example of what is happening today, right? How many of us have muted our WhatsApp groups, certain WhatsApp groups? How many of us have muted some of our friends in these WhatsApp groups? Because there's so much of rumors coming around, people keep sending wrong information. So when people start perceiving you as someone who keeps giving that wrong information, you will find that there will be that dip in trust, and then that has an impact on the relationship. Absolutely. So I have a question I think everyone can read. So isn't storytelling also to engage the audience? Absolutely. In fact, I do another great session which we talk about, storytelling as a business trait, right? But then where even storytelling today has developed, right? How we say the story has developed. Today, we say the moral and then say the story, right? Uh, so there's, like I said, another great session on that, which I usually do. But storytelling is absolutely important, right? But when you're giving information, when you're communicating, there are elements where you have to be concise. There is a place where you are setting that expectation. Then there is, the storytelling method as well. Being coherent. Coherent is nothing but being consistent, being reliable. So your communication should be consistent, which means your style, the things you say, the values that you stand for shouldn't change every day. There should be this consistency in what you are. If you keep, if you're a person who keeps changing according to the situation and the way you communicate, then definitely that will have an impact on relationships. Information that you give should be complete, right? When you give complete information, people tend to trust you more. And being courteous, right? Knowing that not everything has to be communicated at a particular time. There is a time and a place for it. Knowing when to say something, when not to say it. Keeping a check on your tone, the pitch, the kind of words that you use. This again is where language comes into place so that you can articulate your thoughts. So being courteous, knowing to speak. For example, um, at work, if I'm going to give you an example from work, if you have to give feedback to somebody, right, and that feedback is not so great, or you have to give some news that is not so great, and the person has just been through some personal tragedy or a personal problem, you know that. So would you then say it? Would you look for appropriate time, right? Even feedback, for example, when you talk to people about areas of improvement, the kind of language you use, how you say that, needn't necessarily be rude, right? So all of this put together, the 7 C's of communication, as we call it, these are elements that will, impact your relationship. Okay. Before we move on to the next trait, if you have any questions, I'll take them now. All right. So the next trait in our interpersonal skills is trust. How can you tell me what do we mean by trust? Truth. Okay. So there's a question here that says, how can we be courteous when we are irritated? Right. So when you are having these conversations, so there's this example I give, and it's very common. I don't know if you would have heard it. That, let's say you wake up in the morning, and as you're getting ready to work, or you've got ready, you're just about to leave, and your child spills a cup of coffee on you by accident, right? There are 2 ways you can deal with it. One is you yell, scream, shout at the kid, and then what's going to happen is the whole day you are going to have that kind of attitude. Or you can choose to tell your child to be careful, accidents happen, right? And you can change and then go to work, and you'll still be in a good mood. When we're irritated, like I said, this is where opportune time, if you know that you also at that time are not in a position to have that conversation, put that conversation off, right? If you're irritated, and that if the relationship matters to you, whether it is at work or whether it's in personal life, you will consider the opportune time. So if you're in a state of mind where you know that you're going to be harsh or you're going to be rash, then take that time. Okay, put that conversation off, maybe for a few minutes, maybe for an hour, and then speak when you are in that good frame of mind. So if you look at when we say trust, a lot, many of you bring up this thing called truth in being honest, right? Yeah. So when we talk about relationships at work, right, or even in personal life, all of you are absolutely spot on. Trust is about honesty. Trust is about you being truthful, right? But then how do you relate that? That is what we're talking about. How do we uh, even giving our words assurance? Yeah, absolutely, right? So how do you relate that? One of the ways is, you know, when you give your word. So let's look at how do we portray to people that, hey, I'm trustworthy. You can trust me, right? How do we do that? The first thing is learn to share information. It works both ways, right? When you speak to people, you know, a little later on in this training, I'll be talking to you about a concept which we call the Joe Harris window model. And that talks very beautifully of how important it is for you to share information, right? People will notice, right? When you in relationships, people will notice how much you share information about yourself, about the topic that's in discussion, right? If you come off shady, or if people suspect that you're keeping information from them, people are not going to trust you, right? And maybe there is information that you cannot always share. This is you know, something that especially people who are managers face very often, right? How do I, there is some things that I just cannot share with the team. There is something that so this is where again your language comes into play, right? So you know that there is something that you cannot share with the team, then how do you frame that message, right? uh, or how do you tell them, or how do you justify that this is information that cannot be shared now, however, here's what I can do for you, right? Or I will give you this information if people come to know that there is information that you're withholding. But otherwise, your initial speech, or the initial things that you're going to tell them, should be worded very carefully, right? There is a comment here. I'm just going to get that. Yeah. Okay, that was just a comment. Then be open to feedback, right? Sometimes people look at feedback very negatively. I think this has got to do more also with the culture, right? For us, feedback means something negative. I think um, we need to move beyond that. Feedback is a very good thing, and we need to be open with feedback, giving feedback and also receiving feedback. When you're someone who gives feedback, people will watch how you receive feedback. When you start retaliating too often, then people will not trust you. But you should be open to receiving feedback as well. Feedback doesn't have to be harsh. Right? And another deterrent to trust, and I know many of my colleagues don't agree with me, but this is what I have seen as a behavioral specialist. The sandwich technique of giving feedback, according to me, is the worst. I mean, it'll work if you're someone who gives feedback once a year, it will work. But otherwise, it doesn't. Because people will never trust you. Maybe once it sounds nice. Hey, you come to me, I speak to you, I say, hey, you've done this very well, you've performed really well, and you're great at this, you're great at that, but here's what you didn't do well, here's what you didn't write well, this, that, and then again you give some good, but then don't worry, I mean, yeah, you will get there, you're great, you have great talents and stuff like that. You do that 5 times to a person. The 6th time you speak to him or her, she is going to like, okay, fine, yeah, I'm waiting for the but. Right? That's what will happen. When you give feedback, learn to be genuine about it. Right? It doesn't mean if someone, for example, if someone hasn't done well in their work, or there's a report and they haven't done well in it, they haven't given you the information that you were expecting, or in personal relationships, someone has not done something properly, you can tell them, hey, you know what, when I gave you this task to do, here's what I expected. I wanted to see this, I wanted to see that, and here's what's missing. How about I give you another day to complete this, or how about I give you a few more hours to complete this, and come back to me. When you start giving genuine feedback like that, people will start respecting you more. And feedback doesn't have to be given only when something goes wrong. You can speak. How many of us have just called our kids or called our friends to say, hey, you've done excellently well today? Or call one of your colleagues and say, hey, I loved how you did this, I loved how you wrote that, I love the email that you sent to me. Sometimes I do this even for simple sentences that people write. If it captures me, I'll immediately ping them or call them and say, I loved how you worded that sentence, it was nice. Right? So feedback doesn't have to be given only when things are wrong. Feedback can even be given when things are great. Right? uh, people People always do things right 80% of the time. 80% of the time people do things right. 20% of the time they goof up, they make mistakes. Guess what opportunity we choose to give feedback? We only use the 20%. So learn to use feedback more on positive notes as well. When people see you doing that, when people speak to you, they will also be genuine with their feedback. Feedback doesn't have to be blunt. Again, this is where the first plate language comes into play, even with your trust. The way you word it, the kind of words you use, how mindful you are of the situation, all of that comes into play here. All right. The next thing is admit shortcomings. If you're wrong, be brave enough to admit it and say, hey, so yes, I made this mistake and here's what I'm doing to rectify it. People like to hear that, right? When they hear what you are doing or what you have already done to rectify the mistake, people love that. So some of these traits will have initial frictions, right? When you start giving, for example, when you start giving genuine feedback, when you start sharing information, sometimes you don't know where to draw the line. You might end up sharing too much information, or sometimes admitting a mistake can cost you. And that is why you have to remember what I told you at the very start. Practice these things first with a circle that you are close with, right? And as you keep practicing, you get better at it, then people will start noticing this about you. When you start, for example, today I say, hey, admit your shortcomings, right? And somebody goes, tomorrow you're at work and you say, I attended this training with Nathan said, I have to admit my shortcomings, so I'm just going to admit this, you might get into trouble. So practice these things with circles that you're close with, and then slowly these will become natural traits to you. You will then know opportune time, you will know when to admit your mistakes, how to admit it, right? And with the solution, you go with the solution when you're admitting a mistake. So these are things you have to be, like I said, go back to what I told you at the start of the session, which is practice these with circles that are close to you. Have a good posture. Body language is very important. Like I said, this again is a separate training. I can speak for 8 hours on body language and how important it is for people. There's another point that will come up about eye contact as well. Body language is very important. The way you sit, for example, the way you place your hands. If you keep crossing your hands like this when you speak, it usually comes off as someone who's not giving you all the information. There are these vibes we get. We are human beings, right? And we talk about these neurons and how human beings can sense. We can, for example, even if you have your back turned on someone and if someone is staring at you, you will feel it. You'll know that very strange all of a sudden you turn and look, right? So that's how we are. We sense, we know, we can assess through body language whether people are being fully forthwith with us or are they hiding something, right? So body language, eye contact, the way you look at a person. Again, sometimes eye contact can become weird if you keep looking at the person for too long. So we have this general rule in eye contact where we call it the 10-second rule. So you look at a person when they're speaking, you look at them in the eye, and always eye contact should be above the shoulder. Okay, irrespective of gender, yeah, your eye contact should be above the shoulder. 10-second, then you glance elsewhere, which means you look somewhere else and then look back at the person. This avoids that awkwardness. Sometimes eye contact can become staring, and to avoid that, we follow this this 10-second rule. So again, read up about good posture, body language. Like I said, the internet is a great source of information. We don't necessarily have to wait to attend maybe 6 months or 7 months down the line another training. Okay? And again, coming back to that communication, speak clearly when you're speaking to people to build trust. Don't be muffled, don't look. Yeah, eye contact is a great means by which you show that you're attentive, you're looking at the person. Another point I'd like to bring here is, especially in professional environments, the onus also lies on us. If you want good eye contact, sometimes there are the people say when you're attending a meeting, for example, uh, don't wear, like bright colors, or, belts with big buckles, um, or big flowery shirts, because the natural human instinct is to look at these things, and that can become awkward eye contact. So the onus also lies on you. If depending upon where you are, you should know how to dress. If you're at a meeting, that is why sometimes we have dress codes in place. There's something called a professional attire. So the onus also lies on us when it comes to eye contact. How can I deal with a team that's constantly constant spoon feeding and push-ups? I feel they are losing interest and I'm losing hope and energy. All right. Uh, so we have a question here about how do I deal with a team that's constantly looking for me to spoon feed them information and always want me to be behind them. I think you should look at the solution for you would be training. Um, is your team equipped with the skills that they need to perform the job? Do they have the information that they need to perform the job? Do they have the resources that they need to perform the job? When teams lack these things, they look for constant help, to their team leader or manager, because then they don't have the right thing. Another thing for you is to make a note of these knowledge gaps, right? And training is the way you address this. Have a note of these knowledge gaps, see where they are lacking, and try to equip them with the knowledge that they need, right? Motivation. Why is your team lacking energy? Right? If you want to build trust with your team, if you want to be great with your team, look at ways in which you can motivate them outside the framework of business, right? This is where things like lunches, dinners, a simple pizza in the cafeteria in your office, these are all things that will help the communication, which will motivate the team, which will build up the energy, which will make people trust leadership. Take this, for example, if you look at any single religion, take any religion, right? Everything has this concept of food in it, right? Be it when we go to temples, we have, we receive prasadam. When we go to churches, we have Holy Communion. When we go to gurudwaras, we get prasad. When we go to mosques, especially during the time of Ramadan, they give food. Food is an element that connects people. When people sit together and eat, they build greater relationships. Their relationships are very, very strong. If you notice these lunch gangs or tea gangs, as we call them, they'll be so strong, right? Food is an element that bonds them. And that's how we are as human beings. So have these little lunches or dinners or something like that to bring about that energy in your team. And the way you can stop the spoon feeding is to address knowledge gaps and train them. Okay. Okay. How do we know that the information that we are giving is understood by the other person? This is where you have to look for nonverbal cues. You can ask questions, right, to see if they have comprehended your message, but then do not direct the question to a particular person, especially if you're in a group. That is something that you should never do. That is like trying to embarrass a person if they have not listened to you. The way we do it is by asking a question in general to see if people have understood. Look for nonverbal cues. Look at people, um, the way they look at you, the way they nod. People sometimes smile. These are nonverbal cues we look for. And a great way is for you to ask someone to paraphrase, which is to give a summary at the end of your message to see if they've understood. But never do this to a particular person, especially if it's a group. But if it's a one-to-one conversation, you take that extra initiative, and at the end of, if it's a very important conversation, so here's what we've discussed in the last 45 minutes, this, 3 points. I hope we are leaving on the same page. Right? That's one way you can do that. How can we know that the information we, okay, fine. Breaking bread together, yep. So again, how do I get effective with my, or how do I remain confident in my communication, in me, building that relationship? Practice. That's how it comes. So start with, again, reiterating the point, practice with circles that you're comfortable with. The more you practice, the more confident you become. People usually ask me, Nathan, I'm never able to say no. You take sessions on effect of how to communicate assertively. Can you tell me how I can say no? I said, the first thing you need to do is learn to say the word no. We are so uncomfortable in even saying the word. I said, just go and tell your friend to ask you 20 questions every day. Tell your friend to ask you 20 questions. And for all those 20 questions, just say no for the fun of it. Nathan, can you bring my laundry? No. Nathan, can you jump up and down 10 times? No. Nathan, can you run around this building? No. You will see that slowly that confidence in even saying the word will build. Right? So the trick here is for you to keep practicing. Only then you will get confident. How to handle difficult and arrogant people until you feel you are comfortable enough to convert your message. Okay. So difficult people and arrogant people, the problem with them is, remember, they are not angry or arrogant with you. Sometimes they don't even know that they are arrogant. The problem with aggressive people is, and I'm telling you this as a behavioral specialist, the problem with aggressive people is 80 to 85% of the time, they don't know it. No one has ever told them that they are arrogant. And if you help them realize that, that's the greatest thing you can do. But you don't have to go and say, hey, you're arrogant. Right? You don't do that. You tell them, hey, for example, if someone has been, very aggressive with you, you do not, first and foremost, do not address them in public about it. You'll only be flaming the fire. You'll only be fueling the flame. So you need to have a separate conversation, like, and say things like, hey, first of all, I just like to let you know how I feel about the conversation that we've just had. This is how I felt, and maybe you could have said this to me differently, or um, you know tell them how you feel. When you speak about the emotion there, people will understand. Most often people do not know that they're being aggressive, so if you tell them how you feel, it will help. Otherwise, if people are just being super arrogant, I have something that is called the broken record technique. I just keep repeating the same thing over and over again to them. Like, Nathan, you have to come into work today. I have this very important meeting. hey, but today is my day off and I'm unable to come to work because I've already made plans with my friends. Hey, do you know this is really important? I need you to come. Yeah, I'd love to come. However, you see, I've already made plans with my friends and I need to go and attend that. But remember, this is a very important report and this can go to your super boss and he'll have a great opinion about you. Oh, that's absolutely fantastic. However, I've made plans with my friends because today was my day off and I need to attend that. So when you act like a broken record, they will give up. Again, all this comes with practice, guys. Please don't go and practice this with your manager tomorrow and get into trouble. Okay, some more questions. Okay, yeah, yeah, that's a fair point. Very, great point. Wait till they are calm, especially when you're dealing with aggressive people. Remember, you don't have to speak to them immediately. Wait till they calm down and speak to them. That's great. How to keep people focused towards your conversation. So you should learn to speak in such a way that people will want to listen to you, right? Again, your language, your tone. Sometimes people speak so monotonous that 5 minutes into the conversation, you want to sleep. Today, we are talking about interpersonal skills. Interpersonal skills is great, and we need to have these elements of trust. If I'm going to talk to you like this for 45 minutes, obviously you're not going to listen to me. But the way you engage people in a conversation with your tone, your intonation, so all these are language skills. That's why I said at the beginning, language skills is very important to help you articulate your thoughts. All right. Okay. So the next topic we're going to talk about is credibility, right? So from trust, we move to credible. Now, we spoke about how do you make people trust you, right? Now we talk about how do you come off as a credible person. So when Nathan tells me something, I know it to be true, okay? The number one rule here is do not involve in gossip. People will trust you a lot. When people see that you involve yourself in gossip, you lose your credibility, right? First thing is get to know the person. If you really value relationships, whether it is at work or in personal life, get to know the person because this is how you will have to tune your message. At work, get to know your colleagues, get to know who they are, get to know what they like, get to understand their individual talents, right? Get to know the people that you want to work with, get to know the people that you want to have a good relationship with. How do you do this? Also by communicating regularly, right? Have chats, have quick conversations, um, have those water cooler conversations. Even today, at a time when we are all working virtually because of COVID, and we are not in office. The one thing that I do is I choose two random members in my team and I communicate with them regularly. I mean, every day I just call up someone from my team and just speak with them, say, hey, what's happening, how are you coping with things. You need to necessarily do this only in this situation, but even otherwise, get up from your desk, go and speak to people. Nobody is going to shun away from conversations as long as you're not boring, and you know that you're at an appropriate time, that you're not disturbing them from work. Um, a great way to do this is go beyond your immediate teams, right? One practice that I always love about is going beyond your teams to have conversations. For example, I think in ChargeBee we call them knock teams, and Cognizant we call them NSS, the teams that deals with your laptops and anything to do with connectivity and stuff. Make sure you go and have some normal conversations with them. The administration team, make sure you just drop by to say hi, or hey, today the coffee was great or the lunch was awesome. um, the other support teams, your teams, uh, have these regular conversations. People will start, your credibility amongst these people will definitely improve. Even in your teams, just go walk up to people, speak to them. Make sure you don't eat into their time. This is where it's a problem. Um, have quick conversations, not more than 5 minutes. If you see someone sitting, you go to the cafeteria, you see someone sitting there alone, and especially if it's a company that's, for example, I wouldn't suggest this, especially here in an Indian context. If it's a huge establishment, for example, if you're working in these IT parks and you see someone in the cafeteria, please don't approach them. But if it's just your company, you see someone sitting in the cafeteria, you say, hey, can I join you for a cup of coffee? So which team are you from? So this is what I do at work. What do you do? Start learning to build those conversations. And when you are really comfortable, then you can extend it even outside of your company if you're in an IT park. But then it's again, remember, we are humans, we get those vibes. So when your genuine interest is to build network, people will know it. People will not misunderstand you, right? So communicating regularly is the key, and also getting to know the people. Be accurate with your information. Going back to what we discussed earlier, giving the right information. Be believe. Always use this word so superfluously. I sometimes feel it loses its meaning. What is empathy, according to you? If I tell you, hey, I'm having a bad headache, take Croson, have a cup of coffee. Yeah, right. Have a good coffee and get yourself relaxed. Okay. Now, these are things you're saying. Remember, you think that you're being empathetic to me while you're not. This is pity. Okay. What if I'm having a headache because I haven't eaten anything since the morning? Is a croissant going to help? Is a cup of coffee going to help? No. When you say that you have to put yourself in another person's shoes, the first thing you need to do is you need to remove your own shoes. Without removing your own shoes, you cannot put yourself in another person's shoes. The reason you're telling me to have a cup of coffee is because that is something you do when you have a headache. You're asking me to have a croissant because you do that when you have a headache. But you have never taken the time to understand why I am having a headache. And that is the difference between empathy and sympathy. So while it's nice to say put yourself in another person's shoes, in order to do that, you should first remove your own shoes. So the way you do it is important. You don't go and say, hey, what's wrong with you, right? So you say, hey, you look like you're unwell. Is there anything that I can do to help? You don't go and say, what happened? What happened? No, you don't need to know what happened. The problem is the question you ask. Hey, what happened to you? Why are you so sad? Why are you sitting with your head down? No. Hey, you look a little unwell. Is there anything that I can do to help you? If the person wants help, he will say, yes. Can you get me something to eat? Or I'm having a bad headache. And he might open up to you. If he doesn't open up to you, no problem. Just get him what he wants if you want to help. Right? It's the questions you ask that is important. Right? Keep promises. Um, when you tell somebody, hey, I'll get back to you in an hour, get back to them in an hour. If you're still not able to get back to them in an hour, let them know that you're not able to do it. That is where your credibility builds. If, especially with children, right? If you tell your child, I'm busy now, I'll speak to you later, speak to them later. Likewise, your colleagues. If you tell them, hey, I'm in the middle of something, can I get back to you in about an hour? Get back to them in an hour. If you're still not able to say, hey, I know I said I'll get back to you in an hour, but I think it's going to take a little longer. I'm sorry, but can this wait for another 15 minutes? So learn to keep promises and listen. Listen is very, very important. People just forget about this aspect of communication. When we talk about communication, listening skills is like the greatest. You have to listen. If you want people to trust you, if you want people to think that you're a credible person, you need to be patient to listen to them. The problem today is people always listen to respond. That is the wrong approach. You listen to understand. What happens when you listen with a motive to respond is while the person is speaking, you are rehearsing the responses, which means then you are selectively listening to the person and you might lose out on a lot of information that you should know. Instead, listen to understand. This again is a great training topic. I mean, I can even speak on this for 8 hours, but the crux is listen to understand. Do not listen to respond. When you listen to understand, your questions will get automatically registered. And do not pretend to listen. There's a difference between listening and hearing. Hearing is anybody who has 2 ears and who's not hearing impaired can hear. But listening is more than that. You are listening to what the person's saying. You're paying attention to the body language. You're paying attention to the tone. You're paying attention to the pitch. You're paying attention to the words, the kind of adjectives that the person is using, because listening means all of that. And for you to do that, the first thing you need to stop doing is do not multitask. As human beings, we are incapable of multitasking, especially when you are doing important tasks. And one of the important tasks is listening. When you are listening, I don't know how many of you are actively listening now, and some of you are probably responding to an email or checking your WhatsApp and Facebook while you're attending this session, because we think that, hey, I can multitask, I can do that, and I can do this. Well, you can't. The moment you multitask, you divide your attention. You cannot focus 100% on this and 100% on that. You divide your attention. And that's where you're not getting all the information you need, right? So when you listen, when you tell somebody, hey, I'm going to give you 10 minutes of my time, give them those 10 minutes fully. Listen to them. Put everything else, right? Do not tell a person, I'll have a conversation with you, and then keep looking at your watch, looking at the ceiling, looking at the door. These are all some nonverbal cues that you don't want to listen to them. If somebody is ranting, somebody is telling you something that is irrelevant, tell them. So you can wait for a pause and say, so how is this relevant to me? Right? Ask them nicely. But do not, say, okay, I'll listen to you and then not and zone out. That is not fair. So when you tell somebody you're going to listen to them, give them that time fully, right? Do we have any questions on this, on your credibility? Just going to give it a minute for you to enter your questions so I can address them. All right. So I'll stop if I see any questions, but otherwise let's move on. The next, excuse me. The next trait is how you collaborate, how you negotiate. Right? Okay. Am I credible if I keep pointing out mistakes constantly that needs to be addressed? Yeah, of course. You can point out mistakes. Again, going back to the first trait that we spoke about, how you do this matters, right? For example, if your intention is to correct the mistake, speak to the individual, right? Write to the individual. The problem today, there are some things that people do which I find, where there's an ulterior motive, where the intention is not to point out the mistake, but to get the person in trouble. I always teach teams this. If someone has made a mistake and your intention is to rectify the mistake for the, the better good of the entire team, then you will tell that person individually. You'll have a good conversation about it. You will not write to him saying with the entire team copied and say, hey, this is what you've done. You should have done this. You've made a mistake. Copy his supervisor. Not at the first instant, right? If you find that the person is not heeding your advice, then you do, even with escalations, there are three phases. The first phase is you write to the person directly. The second phase is you write to the person again and copy his supervisor, but you address the person saying, hey, I've written to you about this. I haven't received a response yet. Can I have an update? And the third time is when you write to his supervisor, copying the person, saying that I've tried to reach out to this person, I'm unable to receive a response. Is there any way you can help me in this? But the way, if you point out mistakes directly to the person, if someone has done something wrong, have a conversation with them. Trust me, as in my role as sales enablement, one of my greatest task is to keep pointing out mistakes, telling people what they need to improve on. I do this day in and day out, and I can tell you for a fact, no one in my team hates me, because it all matters how you then translate that, what kind of conversations you have, the kind of language you use. Tell them, uh, tell them always when you point out a mistake, also tell them what is the impact. What is the impact of that mistake? They will never do it again. Okay. Okay, thank you for that. That's a nice compliment. Does that answer your question? Exactly. You are what your team is. So how do we collaborate? How do we negotiate? When you work in teams, I mean, if you get two human beings together, there's always conflicts. Any relationship that does not have a conflict is a very unhealthy relationship. The same thing goes for teams. If your team is a team that does not have conflicts, it means there's something very dangerous underlying. That's a time bomb that is waiting to explode. There should be, differences of opinion. People should have different thoughts. People should be able to express that. And these are signs of a healthy relationship and a healthy team. When you do not have that kind of a relationship, it means people are pretending, right? People are pretending, and that is a time bomb. People can only pretend for so long. One day it will explode and it will destroy your team, or it will destroy the relationships. Conflicts are great. How we handle conflicts is where the problem then lies, right? We're going to see how we do that. Now, the first thing we do is, when you're trying to resolve a conflict, or you're trying to negotiate, collaborate, we always reach, common ground. If it's a conflict, keep calm, right? Somebody mentioned this already. Do not get worked up. Remember that nobody is angry with individuals. Where most of the time we get upset because of a situation, right? Nobody gets upset because of an individual. Okay? So remember that. The second thing is, be positive about it. Know that you're going to come out of this with a good outcome. Be positive about it. The third thing is, listen to each other, or listen to each person involved. And when I say listen, remember what I spoke about listening. Okay, so you need to listen to each other. Make sure you take, whatever notes you want. Question when in doubt. Learn. It's perfectly all right to question. Um, we again have this very negative aspect to questioning. We think that questions are bad. Again, that's got to do with culture. As children, we are always told not to ask questions. Teachers have yelled at us when we've asked questions. And there's always this negative connotation to it. People are always saying, don't ask stupid questions, don't ask unnecessary questions. We've always been discouraged that way. But remember, questioning is good. If you're questioning, it means that you're really interested in the outcome. So questioning is good. Learn to ask those questions. Drop your ego. Uh, we don't have to feel hurt if you've made it. Remember, we spoke about admitting to mistakes. So if a mistake has been made, let's accept it, move forward. No one's ego needs to be hurt. And also remember that have a win-to-win approach. There's always common ground for any conflict you have, for any situation where you are negotiating. I think there's one question. Well, it's good to ask questions when you're in doubt. If you don't understand something, please ask. Again, if you are on the other side, if you are someone who is speaking, again, this is where clarity comes, because sometimes we speak with too many jargons, we use too many acronyms, and people get confused, they're not able to understand. But asking a question is never a wrong thing. Practice, there's this, asking question is an art. Knowing when to ask the right questions, what kind of question words you use. We are so used to asking questions without using question words that sometimes we ask the wrong question. So yeah, there's absolutely nothing wrong in asking a question. Trust me, people will not feel bad about it. These are mostly our assumptions that hold us back. So feel free to ask questions, but then always keep a note on your tone and the kind of words that you use to ask the question. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about a concept. Okay, so how we spoke about trust, we spoke about credibility, we spoke about language and communication, we spoke about how to collaborate, but how do we understand all of this in a framework, right? So this awesome framework that we call the Johari window model. It's called Johari because someone called Jonathan and Harry came up with this, right? So in our life, we have these 4 quadrants, which we call the open quadrant, the blind quadrant, and you have the hidden and the unknown. So what is this open or free area, or what we also call as arena, right? This is information that you know about yourself and information that others know about you. This is a great area to be in. This is where people will trust you more, your credibility will be increased the greater that this area is. The second quadrant in the information that we share is known as the blind area. So the blind area is information that others know about me, but I don't know. Okay, this can be because we haven't discovered that as yet. Once. All right. The third area is the hidden area. This is information that is known by me, but unknown by others. I would say there should always be that hidden spot. Not everything about you needs to be known to everyone. There is personal information that we just shouldn't share, which is good to have. And there is that unknown area. This is information that's still not known by me, still not known by others. This is information about you that you are yet to discover. The way you get to know this is by others' observation, self-discovery, right? How many of us knew that we are capable of being indoors for a long number of days before this situation, right? Or we have that much of patience that we can cook, or sometimes somebody will come and tell you things about you that you haven't discovered yet, right? So all of us will always have these 4 quadrants in the information that we share, but the greatest quadrant to be in is this open and free area, right? And how do you increase this? It is by asking and telling. The more questions you ask, the more information you share, the more you are in an open and free, but also know where to draw the line, that you do not share information that is not needed, or information that is personal to you. Do we have any questions? So we have an action plan. So like I told you, remember, you need to have an action plan. You need to be patient. You need to practice what you've learned today, implement what you've learned today, and you will see that you'll see changes. So have an action plan. Try to come up with a framework. This is just something that I put up, needn't necessarily something that you should follow. But if you have a different style of making things work for you, then you can do that. So targeted by the segment, right? Confident communication. I'm going to work on trust and rapport, building credibility, learning to collaborate. Look at these things. Have a date. When you're going to start. Check progress in between, and then see if you want to continue that or move on to the next step. Again, do this with circles that you are comfortable with, so that you don't spring a surprise on somebody in that change. I'm just going to stop sharing for a moment. I can bring up the chats. Harun, are you able to make me the co-host? Okay, so can you highlight some points on public speaking or interactions? You don't have, this is not for you to apply in your interactions. It's more of a, for you to self assess yourself. There are these, the hidden, the blind, the arena, and the best place to be in is the open or the free area. And the way you do that is by sharing information and also by learning to ask good quality questions. So by building on those two things, by learning to ask, good questions, by learning to speak about yourself and, the kind of information you give, you broaden the scope. And the more broader the scope is, the more trust, the more credibility people will have in you. How can you speak in a group confidently? I think it is again with practice. Some of the things that I did when I decided that I wanted to take up learning and development, which means that I will need to speak in public often. Some of the things that I've done is rehearse, rehearse, rehearse. Stand in front of a mirror and speak. Record yourself. You can do these things like, speak on a topic for a minute, record yourself and listen to it. You are sometimes the best judge of, the kind of, to judge yourself on how you speak. But it's all about the practice and rehearsal. And again, practice with people you're comfortable with, and surely you'll be able to display better public speaking in larger forums. I find it tough to build rapport and maintain this. Yeah, building rapport, again, it depends on the kind of questions we ask. And then remember this thing about speaking regularly, communicating regularly with people. This is where rapport building will help. When we have conversations with people only when it's a necessity, it becomes difficult to build rapport. So you need to learn to have conversations outside of that. Have these small conversations as you pass along. When you see that person, a 2-minute conversation wouldn't help. When you start doing this, then when you have to have concrete conversations where you have to build that rapport and maintain it, then it becomes easier, especially with your employees or with your team. Okay, so when you want to, in public speaking, when you want to maintain good eye contact, there are two methods we do, which we call the W and the M. So you don't have to necessarily look at individuals. So when it's an audience, so when you say the W eye contact, which means I start from this corner of the room, just, imagine you're doing a W across the room. So then you start there, you then look in front, then you look at people who are sitting in the middle, then you look to people sitting immediately in front on your right, and then at the extreme right. Or you do the W, then you do the M, right? So you keep doing this constantly, so you make sure you're covering the entire audience. Okay, so when you speak personally, okay. So here again, personally, remember the 10-second rule. The 10-second rule is always maintain eye contact above the shoulder. It can become awkward. So the 10-second rule is you look at the person, you don't have to literally time 10 seconds, but approximately 10 seconds, then you glance anywhere else, and then again look back. That will avoid the awkwardness. All right. Understanding your audience is very important, but what if you have an audience like today, right? I don't know many of you. I don't know what the audience is. The good thing is, do not assume that your audience will know what you're going to speak about. When you go with that assumption is where we start speaking at a level where you can lose your audience. So always try, for example, if you're speaking on a specific topic, for example, as a learning and development, personnel, there are many jargons that we use. Do not use those jargons. Keep it simple. If you have to use an acronym, abbreviate it. If you have to use an abbreviation, if you have to use a jargon, at least once in your session, tell them what it is. Never assume that people will always understand, or don't go with an assumption that people will know what you're going to speak about. When you are faced with an audience that you have no clue about, when you're faced with an audience that you're going to speak to for the first time, what I do is I do not assume that they will know what I'm going to speak about. We'll address questions now before we conclude, but I just want to let you know you can connect with me on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn profile, just look up Nathan Phillip. You get my LinkedIn profile. You can, get in touch if you have any questions. Private message me and I'll respond. But if you have questions now, we can take that for another 10 minutes or so. All right, so there is a link for you to send your feedback. Please do send that out. When a mistake is pointed out, people at times get offended. Yeah, like I was saying, it all depends upon when you're pointing out that mistake. So if your intention is to rectify the mistake, do it with the person privately. Do not point it out, in a larger audience. That's when people get offended. In fact, people will respect you more when you do that privately and say, this was a mistake that was I saw, and maybe you can correct it. If it is something that you have to absolutely say at the moment, right, in a larger audience, if you have to point out a mistake, choose your words carefully. Do not say, hey, I see there's a mistake. So something that I would say is, if you're differing in your opinion, you start off always with, in my opinion. Say, in my opinion, I think this would work. Or in my opinion, perhaps we can use a different setup, or try a different framework. So start off with things like that if it's absolutely necessary to do in a larger gathering. But when it comes to mistakes, it's always better done with the individual privately. Mm,
Hi all, this is Harun representing GUVi. Thank you, Philip, for this wonderful presentation. I hope everybody loved it. I hope this webinar was very helpful for everyone. So thank you, Philip. Thank you for doing it with GUVi.
Hey, thank you very much, Harun, for the opportunity. And I hope everyone here enjoyed the session. Feel free to reach out to me through LinkedIn if you want to connect. And if you have questions, private message me. I'll get back to you. But thank you very much. It was great